Hello, it's Mr. Carson again. I thought I'd come and have a chat with you about how we can also fix up our report a bit better. So when we're writing a science report, we should always try to focus a little bit, because most of the topics we're going to look at are really large and would take too much time and be very difficult for you. So far, I'm hoping that when you start a project, you find out about it, so you go and do a bit of research. That's always a very good idea. Because the more you know about something, the clearer you can explain it to someone else. And that's your job, the explaining. So you've got to make sure that you are clear in what you do. So doing some research, make sure you do that. But by the same token, make sure that you tell me at the end of your report where you got your research from. Remember, we talk about academic honesty, and that means we don't take credit for other people's work. If we use someone's work, we let the reader know that at the end of the topic. Alright, so we've got this, and by now you should have also done the variables. You've done a section on variables, and you understand that we have an independent variable that we change, only one, to make it a fair test. Then we have a dependent variable which we measure, again only one, and then we have a series of variables which we control and keep the same. So we've done all this, and that makes the next part easier. Let's try now to use what we have to focus our project. Alright, we're going to link all those three things together, and we're going to what's called create a research question. Now, a research question is simply a focus or a purpose of what you're doing your activity to find out. So don't just say, I'm going to find out about pendulums, or I'm going to find out about acid rain, or I'm going to find out about electricity. They're too big, so we've got to narrow it down, and that's what a research question does. Now, the question should, in one sentence, link your dependent variable with your independent variable and the wider topic or the background information you've gathered. So hopefully you can see and be able to do that. So let's look at an example here. We've got Malcolm, a fictitious person, is using his grandmother's recipe to make a loaf of bread. But Malcolm decided to change something, or he didn't follow the instructions that well, and he ended up making something that wasn't really right. So as you can see, he goes and talks to his grandmother about it, and she makes some suggestions. Alright, so she says you could do this. Now, let's have a look at this one. And if we're going to work this out properly, we need to go back and do all these other things again. So let's look and see if we can come up with the variables. Now, if we go to our method or recipe over here, it tells us what we need, because it's got all of the equipment and the materials we're going to use, and then it tells us what to do down here. So what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to create or answer the question about some of the possible variables that are there. Okay, now you've had a go at that, let's see if they come to some sort of agreement with what I've said. I've said that the variables were water, yeast, salt, sugar, flour, butter, how long we're going to knead or rub and roll and punish the bread to get it to rise, how long we're going to leave it to rise, how long we're going to bake it for, and the temperature we're going to bake it. So they're my variables. So now I should be able to create from that a focus question that Malcolm could use, or Malcolm could focus a question that he could use. So How about we go and do that, and we would end up with, here is a possible focus question that we could use. Will adding extra water affect the bread baked using Grandma's recipe? Right, that is quite concise, so we know what we're testing and we're going to see how it affects. Let's look at a couple of other examples. Right, here we've got a different experiment. I would like you to come up with the variables on this. So let's have a look and see if you can answer the questions now. Okay, you can see the type of variables we can see are the fertiliser, and we could also talk about the mass of fertiliser. Please don't use amount if we're talking about a solid fertiliser. Right, the pots. We could talk about the size of the pots also, or what the pots are made of. Are they plastic? Are they ceramic? We could then talk about the amount of soil we used, the type of plant we used, and the height of the plant. All of those would be suitable for variables. So now let's look at something there and let's try to make a question. I would like you to try to come up with a question now. Alright, now as you can see, I've actually come up with a possible research question, and I forgot to put a variable in. I'm wondering how many of you picked that up. That variable, of course, is time, and that would be something we could think about on our way through. Alright, I hope this is making some sense. Let's look at one more example. We're talking about maths exams, and we're talking about what's going on. I will give you a couple of minutes to read this, and then I would like you to try to answer the question that follows. Remember, look at the variables. Think about some variables and see what's going on. Okay, here are my variables I could quickly look at and see. There might be some more in there, and I think we can see there is an obvious question. And as you can see, there's a nice question there. How does the effect of the amount of sleep a student has affect their score in a math exam? We could also have something like, does diet or the meal a person has before a math exam affect their score? There are other ones, and also again you'll notice I left a skill off. I left variables off. The variable I left off this time was, of course, their score. So I'm hoping you're picking up these mistakes as we go through. Right, on that note, I'm hoping you now have a better understanding of this. If not, of course, see your teacher. That is always a good option.